Um, all right. Hey, recording in progress. All right. Okay. Well, now we're official. Mike, we got a lot to talk about today. Some items on sellers' disclosures. When things go bad. Wow.
It's
That
one of my
never
favorite
happens.
subjects. I mean, not for other people because
That
I'm,
never
not directly involved, but
like that never happens in a real estate deal, does it? Things go bad.
only
Uh,
20% of the time.
so they were going to review some contingency offer situations. Got a few things to add to that one too, Mike. I like your lending switcheroo and how to handle that as a listing agent. So that's a good one. And we've got some disciplinary actions to review, I guess. So the newsletter, yes, which is always fun.
I don't know if
So
we'll get to those today. And also, they're not that exciting anyway. So we've reviewed so many at this point. We got to wait for the new fresh batch to come out every time now. But yeah, part of the reason why we're going to discuss sellers disclosures is because, well, they're always top of mind and frequently connected to many of the problems we're experiencing post closing and actually during the transaction. We're going to talk about when things go bad, especially post closing, because I am currently dealing with and have been dealing with for some time some post closing issues directly related to sellers disclosures. Um, Contingent offers. I do feel like we go over this, regularly, but I also feel like there's definitely agents who are comfortable with this, but there's a larger number who are not comfortable and feel really confident when handling this. And I just had a situation brought to us this week. Buyer attempted to go from VA to conventional and how we handled it. And I thought the way the agent handled it was really good. So I want to share that because I think it's meaningful. And it actually just discuss that situation in general because I think we default to let's keep the deal alive, and that may not be. I think it maybe frequently is the best decision, but it may not always be the best decision. So we'll talk about maybe ways to handle that a little better. Um, but
nice.
but I think we'll start off by going over maybe just some key sections of the seller's property condition disclosure and talking about those. Um, and also talk about, if you're a buyer's agent and you receive seller's property condition disclosures and you review them, and you find things that you feel like may be omitted or that maybe require for further disclosure, how we should handle that, and how we should at least document some of the things on there. So anyway, and as always, feel free to raise your hand, turn off your mic, just talk. It's a small enough group, anybody can just unmute and contribute at any time.
Sounds great.
All
If
righty,
you
I'll go.
pull that form up and hit those sections.
Yep.
While you're doing that, I'll just remind everybody that when it comes to legal issues historically inside of our company, or frankly, any company, most of the issues are pertaining to misrepresentation on disclosure issues, and buyers feel like they were not, adequately disclosed, and so they feel like they were damaged, and in comes the lawsuit. They typically rope us in to try to get access to the E&O premium that can be, or the claim that can be paid. And so they'll try to have wrongdoing proved on the part of the agent in which they knew something they did not disclose. So there's a little twist on this too about material fact. Do you guys think you understand what a material fact is? You can give a definition of what a material fact is. And why is that important in disclosure? And how does that differ from confidential information? So if on one hand you had confidential information, on the other hand you had material information, what is material information compared to confidentiality?
It's something both parties should know.
Really good. Yeah. Both parties should know. That's really good, Bettina. Thank you. Anybody else?
Linda says it would change the buyer's choices if they knew it, I think is what she's getting at. Very good.
Man, this is textbook. You guys are right on the money. Material information is something that would alter the outcome if the parties knew the information. And it's something that, well, here, instead of thinking the less, there's one more aspect of this. What is it?
I don't know if we said it, but has anybody mentioned that we're required to disclose those things regardless of who we represent in the transaction?
Correct. Where confidentiality is not disclosed at all, it might be something that would weaken the position, a bargaining position. But with material information, we must disclose it. Of course, the seller's disclosures has tons of details of material information. The last one, I'll give it to you, is the party's ability to perform under the contract. So if the seller cannot clear title, that's material. If the buyer cannot come up with the funds, whether that's whatever that is, and you know that that's the case, this can be a little tricky because with buyers, we have to say, well, they can't perform. They really can't perform under the contract. How about when it's conditioned on a house being sold and a dishonest agent has not disclosed that? That would be a material in fact, and it would need to be disclosed. I can't purchase the property unless I sell one. If the Rep C was filled out improperly, that would be a lack of disclosure of material information because it affects the party's ability to perform. Okay, so what the party should know, it would alter the outcome and change the buyer's decision. Or number three is it affects the party's ability to perform under the contract. Material information. So good reminder. Okay, Mike, take us away. What section are we looking at here that we want to focus?
I want to start off though by set up the seller's disclosures in a couple of ways. One, there's a really good example of good intentions gone wrong, and I want to remind everybody about this. This was a former agent in our company who had really good intentions of helping an elderly person who could not type or write and was essentially dictating items onto the seller's disclosure because there was no other way that we could see to get text onto this document. The bottom line was that's not the correct thing to do. Under no circumstances should you yourself put pen to paper and fill this out in any way, shape, or form. So let's start there. But I think when we discuss this with our clients, I think the first thing we should do is we should just simply read instructions to seller. So they're aware that this isn't just part of a contract. They're obligated by state law to disclose these things. So read it real quick. Seller is obligated under law and under Rep C Section 7A, regardless of occupancy, to disclose to buyers defects in the property and facts known to seller that materially and adversely affect the use and value of that property cannot be discovered by a reasonable inspection by an ordinary prudent buyer. This form is designed to assist seller in complying with these disclosure requirements. So just if you only had to set it up one way, just read that document, and I think that's a pretty good way to jump off that conversation.
Hey, Mike and Will, let me just add one more thing to this, because this is another thing that we often see where buyer and seller, primarily dealing with investors, they agree that no seller's disclosures will be provided. Mm-hmm. What you just talked about, Mike, is the part that often ends up being forgotten. Is just because buyer and seller agree that no seller's disclosures are going to be provided doesn't mean that the obligation of the seller to disclose a material fact is now gone away.
Correct.
That obligation to disclose those material facts are still required by law, even though they're not going to fill out any type of physical seller disclosure. So just be mindful of that.
Yeah, and I'd also add. Yeah, go ahead, Will.
Well, I was going to say, going back in my database here, attorneys have said many times you cannot contract out of the law. Yeah, I mean you don't contract out of it. You can't. That's an unenforceable contract. So yeah, we do get this. We will provide seller disclosures. We never lived there. We're investor. We're the property owner, whatever, landlord. So we don't know any information. Baloney. They've often paid, maintenance, contractor invoices related to the property over time. All of that information must be disclosed. It's a very, very dangerous position to put a seller in if they don't disclose. They're going to get a lawsuit and they will lose, and we'll go down with them. So I know we've hit a lot of this before, but it's a good reminder.
Yeah. Also, remember, they're basically saying, hey, I know that we remodeled and inspected this house from head to toe and spent more time in there than anybody we know, but we also don't know anything about the home. Very weird position to be in. Steve says, Rep C delineates what the seller must disclose. It doesn't say that there must be a form. That is correct, Steve. And correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but I'm pretty sure that you could take a single blank piece of paper and say, I switched a sink out last week, and technically comply with that, though that doesn't seem to be sufficient.
Mm-hmm. Hey, I'm going to remind everybody of this one. Mark O'Brien just recently sold a house. I guess it was last summer. Do you guys remember what he did with his seller property condition disclosures? So this is someone who understands very, very well the consequences of disclosure. So he did use the UAR seller property condition disclosure. And then how many pages did he add to that? He added 6 additional pages. So there's our own counsel, and I think that's we should echo that with our sellers. It's like those reels you see that say, 3 things I learned being a cardiologist. 3 things I learned being a real estate attorney. Over disclose is better than under disclose every day.
All right, jumping in. We're going to hit these real fast so we don't spend a massive amount of time on it. If you do have some experience with any given section, feel free to speak up. By the way, this isn't new. It's less than 24 months old. This new property seller's condition disclosure. It's more robust if you don't use the old one, if you come across it. So section 2, additions, remodels, and completions. This is a good reminder that carpet, paint, and wallpaper are not something that you need to disclose, but any other upgrade is. So if you are replacing sinks or toilets or anything like that, that definitely falls under this disclosure. And also, they did buy the home and they did ask questions of the former owner. That knowledge should also be disclosed. Just because you weren't involved with it doesn't mean you don't need to disclose it. To your knowledge, did any property manager tenants make additions, structural changes, or alterations? Seems pretty self-explanatory. Use of property. This is something that can get us in a lot of hot water if we do not properly vet this. This happens actually a lot in Ogdens. So, non-conforming duplexes or triplexes, or somebody has, they're renting out something that they shouldn't be renting out. So if you are doing anything that's even remotely related to multifamily, make sure that you yourself understand what these zoning laws are, even though the seller is disclosing them. Yes, the seller must disclose and really understand it, but we are not off the hook if the seller's wrong and we're wrong as well. We're still on the hook for that. Okay, let's move on. Roof. This seems pretty self-explanatory. I think if the roof's 20 years old and we know that there's some problems with the roof, we know the roof is 20 years old. Just pay close attention, especially if you're a buyer's agent and you see that the roof is 20-ish years old, and they're just saying it's great. Make sure you try to probe a little bit more and say you haven't had a single leak. Roof, make sure you're on top of that one. Let's see. This is becoming a bigger issue in our town: culinary and secondary water. These are things you probably want to understand as well. I know that some people, there's definitely been times where people have been told they have secondary water and they don't. That's something that there's a lot of you agents out there who know neighborhoods and know what's secondary and culinary and what's available in those places. So be aware of those things. Private water rights. This is a minefield, by the way. Will, are you good at water rights? Does anybody on here think they're good at water rights by raise of hand? Travis, I feel like you might want to raise your hand on this one.
I do, only because this huddle couldn't be more applicable. We found ourselves in a unique situation yesterday where we're participating with a title company, not ours, of course, where water rights were not necessarily disclosed and transferred. The seller property disclosure was misleading at best, and they are tapping into E&O and insurance on this very topic. In fact, I will send you, Will, and Mike the documents on it. And it really boils down to mineral and water rights out of Duchesne County and improper disclosure.
Yeah, I do feel like there's in my career, the number of the people who have owned water rights that really understood what they owned and how that was recorded and how it was handled. Very small number of people who even own these things really are good at it and understand what they own and how you access that. So it is a problem. Excuse me. So, if you're working something and it's got a little bit of land, or you're doing a land deal and there's some water rights associated, remember, you are a conduit to the answer. You do not want to be the sole person tracking down information and providing it. You can provide links, provide contact information to the right person to talk to. Do not be the conduit that transfers information from one party to the other, because you are setting yourself up for problems there.
Well said, Mike.
Thanks, Travis.
Critical.
Yeah, honestly, like, even of all the land deals I've ever done in my life, I really.
This is Joseph at set scheduled agent accept.
Okay, thank you, Bettina. Of all the deals I've ever done that pertain to water rights, I felt pretty stupid while I was doing it because I was just like, here's a phone number to call. You should call these people, and it doesn't feel very helpful, honestly. But it is. I mean, if these people are going to own these things, they really have to understand, where these water rights are coming from, how you can use them, and how they affect your, future development, whatever it is.
Mike should also make the distinction between water shares and water rights.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So water shares are personal property. Water rights go with the land. And also that distinction is misunderstood by the people who have water rights and water shares. And they will, in their ignorance, sometimes intentionally and unintentionally, they will attempt to not disclose those things and not bring them along when they should. If you're dealing with a piece of land, this is a major issue. So you cannot overlook what water may go with a piece of land. The correct water rights or water shares can make or break the value of a piece of land, and can decimate the value of a piece of land if somebody buys it without the right stuff. So thank you, Kevin.
Yeah. Another quick tip for the Park City agents around here is we have another version of the seller's property condition disclosure for the Park City Board, because we deal with historic issues, we deal with mine tailings, we deal with all sorts of zoning for nightly rentals, on and on and on. We have 2 or 3 more pages in addition to the ones we're reviewing here on the standard UAR one. So just be aware, don't use this one up here, use the Park City.
Right.
I'm so good. I'm so happy I've never had to track down mine tailing information.
Oh, there's maps and there's things you have to do and disclosures you have to make if the property's in a certain zone.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Moving on, irrigation, secondary water. A lot of this information they should have. Secondary water is not usually that big of a deal. I think we can, kind of grind your way through that. We hit private water rights. 1 second. Okay. Sewer septic tank. Okay, so I know a lot of you, Park City may have some of this, but if you're just along the Wasatch Front, there's not a lot of septic tanks, and most of it is connected to public sewer. If you do have septic, this is something you better, better be disclosed. The location should be marked. You should have a really good understanding of where the location of the septic tank is, how to access it, how to clean it. And, the seller needs to be leading the way this entire time. So that can be a big issue
Should probably
too.
have it inspected too, because many of them fail and they don't even realize it till the sale occurs and somebody does an inspection. So,
Yep.
and it's costly. It'll kill a deal.
Yeah, if you, especially like a recreational property, right? Something that's only getting used sporadically throughout the year. People really aren't maintaining those the way they should a large portion of the time. So if you're doing any kind of recreational property that has a septic tank, that should be one of the first things that you order is get an inspection on that. All right.
A lot of septic tanks, Mike, in Summit, oh my gosh, oh God, I forgot the name of it. Kevin, can you help me?
Anywhere in the county outside of the
acro-
city here, pretty much everything in the city's on sewer, but when you get anywhere outside of Park City and the surrounding areas, you're gonna find a lot of them.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. Heating, cooling. It's a lot of this is self-explanatory. I feel like everybody in Utah has really good experience handling heating and cooling issues. The biggest thing here is if you're talking about heating and cooling, just be aware of, the winter months, the transitions from the winter months to the summer months, can be, that's the time everybody's nervous that is this the year my HVAC is going to go out on July 3rd. So just be aware that, that may be top of mind, but your heating system may also be bad. So make sure we're advising our people to inspect both those systems, which I think we're all doing. Okay, appliances. I don't think that's fireplace, stoves. This is something that definitely gas fireplaces. I'm pretty sure all our home inspectors are doing inspections on gas fireplaces and checking for leaks, that type of thing. This is the time to do it before, those seems like those are easy fixes. So maybe you might want to tackle that before you list it and have somebody go through there and do a home inspection. Let's see. I think structural items and soils. These things seem pretty easy until you get up into the foothills or have any type of terrain, and then we're talking about potential structural issues and settling, and especially when you go into older neighborhoods. Ogden has a lot of old homes that have structural issues and settling, and so if you're walking up to a home and you see settling and you see those really old foundations, make sure you're digging deep with the seller on that, and because they have to have some idea. If they're living in these old homes, they dealt with the structure. It's almost a certainty that somebody has an idea about what's going on with the structure. Linda says Iron County has a water disclosure doc. Is that what you're saying, Linda? Okay. Yeah, that would be good. What does that water disclosure doc look like? Is it why do you need a special water disclosure doc down there?
They've just had so many issues that they've come up with their own documents to clear it up so that there's more
Okay.
information given and so that you are checking out what you need to be checking out.
Okay.
They have classes like I think every quarter actually on water rights just because it's such an issue.
Yeah. It's a big,
Could you
big
send
issue.
that copy, a copy to me, Linda? That'd be great. Thanks.
Soils. Are you aware of any settlement or heaving of soils on the property or adjoining property? I mean, some of these questions, this is a good example of like, what is the definition of heaving of soil? I mean, I don't know that there's, what does that actually mean? I don't actually know what they're talking about with heaving of soil. Anybody want to contribute to heaving of soil? Kevin Larson probably knows.
Unfortunately, I do know it's, if there's a lot of water in it and it freezes, it heaves, it expands. The hillsides start sloughing away, and or you could actually get it from, well, the canals up there in Davis County. When the canals overflowed, the water that went out of the canal then caused the soil to actually heave and slide down the hill and wipe out homes. And then we saw in Draper Edge Homes, that whole development where the soils were heaving, and it was never fully, no geotechnical report was ordered, and all those homes were falling into the ravine behind the house. So yeah, it's kind of poetic that Edge Homes are living on the edge.
Yeah, that's
Hey, Mike,
unfortunate naming. I mean,
Yeah, I happen to know the attorney for Edge Homes, and he thought that was pretty funny too.
Steve
I
asked,
just looked it up. A legal definition is it's what Kevin just said, and it's when unsaturated soil, so very dry soil, becomes saturated and it starts to lift.
Mhm.
So if like when we went, we're dry, and then all of a sudden we get a lot of water. Instead of it sloughing off, it can also lift foundations up because it becomes saturated. Thought that was interesting.
Yeah, Bob Stark's just down in St. George area there. They have a lot of blue clay. And when
Yeah,
it gets
yeah. It
wet,
mentions clay. Like,
expands.
yeah, clay can expand. That's the number one culprit. Nice, Kev.
Yeah, I own a home in Colorado as an investment property, and I have expansive soils. And to that point, it lifts the foundation and compresses the walls, and they have to install helical piers. So let's just say we've owned that one for a long, long time.
You've got some disclosures to make when you finally sell it, right?
Yes, sir, Kevin. Yes, sir.
Steve says, what about tree roots underground and heaving? I don't know that doesn't sound like that meets the definition of heaving, but that's actually that's a real problem.
Yeah.
I got a really bad flu about a week ago and was heaving.
Yeah, the tree roots lifting sidewalks, these are all things that you should be disclosing. Again, and Steve said it in the chat a little earlier, all of this, remember, anytime anybody asks a question about any of these things and you don't know the answer, we default to disclosing it. It's a get out of jail free card, as Steve says, which it's completely true. Are you aware of any sliding or earth movement on the property, landslides, falling rock, debris, or mud flows? Yeah, all those are big deals, and people fix them, and they don't want to talk about them anymore, especially with like retaining walls, stuff like that. We can have huge issues with retaining walls. So if you drive up to a property that sits 15 feet or 20 feet above the street level on a hillside and you see a mass of retaining walls, be on the lookout. Are you aware of any past or present movement, shifting, deterioration, or other problems with the walls or foundations? All of this is pretty thorough on the structure. And quite frankly, here in Ogden, with a lot of these old homes that are being sold, I've had many of these issues that have come up with structural issues of shifting and cracking walls and all of those things. And we all know it almost always comes down to, well, the inspector didn't look in that room because it was packed full of XYZ and they couldn't get back there and they weren't willing to move it. That is no consolation prize to anybody who's have a serious issue coming up. So be aware of that. Do you know if anything on your property, such as the fence, deck, or other improvement, encroaches, extends onto adjoining property? This is also a huge issue, and quite frankly, unless on a regular single family home, I don't know how many people are actually getting surveys, but it kind of comes to this issue, whether or not they believe it to be true. So, if you're doing a land deal, I think more people are much more prone to do surveys and really figure out what's encroaching and not encroaching. But are you aware?
Let me add on to that one real quick. Just a call a couple of days ago. One of our great agents, very experienced, a very high-end home in Holiday. And if you've ever been to the Cotton Bottoms and you know that area, there's some big lots in there. We dug up a tough shed that was placed over on what looked like a utility easement. And the utility easement was recorded, but there was a section of that in 1974 that two owners had decided that they would remove a wall and correct this boundary issue where this wall was placed. The survey was done on the property in preparation for getting it listed. I can't remember if it's 1 or 2 acres, but it's a big lot. Lots of trees in a fantastic, high-end area. This is a 10 million plus property. Well, our seller has placed a shed on that property, and so we had to figure out how to cope with that. Here's the thing for everyone. Look, yeah, we had the benefit of a survey, but the first phase of the survey, all was identified was a stake on one side or the other. Nothing was said about whether or not there was an encroachment confirmed or not. It took the listing agent to dig a little deeper and ask the survey company to come back out and confirm whether or not this particular encroachment was real in the case of the shed. Well, it was, and it was confirmed, and he actually went above and beyond and highlighted the areas and everything else. Couple of legal points here. When there's a written document that's been recorded in 1974, there's no issues here of adverse ownership. In other words, it's 50 years, it must be what it is, right? No, because the document in 1974 was recorded in which the owners identified the property as being owned by, in this case, Lot B, we'll call it, the neighbor. It still owns this property. And so they have to reconcile it. It was interesting, also highlighted is that the owners had agreed to share in the expense of removing a wall. Well, 50 years later, they haven't removed the wall. Probably because it's not worth it. Like the cost to remove wall is not worth the hand, whether this is 6 feet or 8 feet, something like that is worth the removal of the wall. Earlier, we said never be the source of the information. So we never want someone to say, well, agent told me this, right? What we want to do is we want to send over the survey with the details and say, this is what we've discovered. Feel free to go further if you would like. And that's the direction we gave. Legal advice to our seller or anyone else is not something that we are equipped to do. We're not built that way to give advice as to what to do once an encroachment may be discovered. Our advice is to get their own legal advice as to what to do when an encroachment may be discovered and how they want to handle that. So just a little tip there.
All right, very good. Mold, it seems to be, man, I'm still in the middle of a mold issue, mold and everything else issue on a home.
Just throw the bread away, Mike. Let it go. Hey, geez, buy a new loaf.
I'm a homesteader. I do everything myself. I make my own penicillin. I do it all. So it just doesn't work that way. The mold thing, I feel like if you are aware of any leaks in the home that they say they have fixed, you need to pay close attention to potential mold around those areas. I know it seems obvious, but if they like, I can't count how many times they said, well, our bathroom was leaking and we fixed the problem and that's it. Well, if it's leaking upstairs, you have a whole section of your home that's probably moldy. I mean, it just probably is. And you need to look into those things. If basements get flooded and, maybe it's happened a couple times and they just replaced the carpet, the odds that, there's mold down there are pretty high. Okay. And these are the things that obviously we want to discover before we close. So be aware of that. Moisture conditions. Again, it feels like of all the non-disclosure issues, everybody wants to lie about their flood in their basement. And then when they tell the truth about the flood in their basement, they don't disclose the full truth. And moisture. And I do know one of the things that if your inspector is finding any moisture in those basements, your radar needs to be pinged and you need to make sure that all those things are investigated to everyone's satisfaction.
But, you know, these come up when the neighbors talk, guys. The neighbor will say, "Oh, you must have been okay with that, you know, that flood issue they had a few years back," and then that's the start of the domino. Remember, if you can't discover it, like if it's been covered up by sheetrock and carpet and paint, then that's a really good that's breeding ground for fraud. Because see, a prudent buyer can't discover it. There's no way an inspector, unless they dug into the sheetrock or drilled into the sheetrock and tested for moisture, that they're going to find this. And a lot of people opt not to do those kinds of tests. It's very evasive and it's damaged the property. So we don't do that. So if it's been sheetrocked over, I would even remind sellers: is there anything in the home that's been covered up because of by way of repair that can't be discovered? If you did cover it up, we must just talk about what we did, what happened that we covered, right? So keep that in mind.
Yeah. And this other moisture condition section, I think, is really thorough. And so, you know, if you do see anything that sort of starts out with, we had a broken pipe that ran for a half a day, or we had a kitchen sink that leaked into the basement for, 2 months before we discovered, or whatever. If you see any of that, that's your cue that there could be bigger problems. Just remember that. Hazardous conditions. They say with the exception of meth. Are you aware of any past or present hazardous conditions, substance or materials such as asbestos, lead paint, methane, radon, radioactive, urea formaldehyde foam insulation, probably said that wrong, or buried storage tanks and lines? And also, let's see on here, do you know a tip to mitigate? I don't know that this comes up a lot, other than radon gas is a big issue, and obviously lead-based paint. And the older homes may have some asbestos problems in them. So, we know by the age of the home whether or not these things will have some of these issues. And then obviously it has its very own disclosure, its very own line. Congratulations, Meth. You are 21C on the disclosure form, all by yourself. Listen, meth is everywhere, and I think we talked about this recently. Especially, by the way, the odds that, let's say we pick any house in America, and regardless of its age or pricing, new construction might be the most likely to have meth.
Really?
Yeah, because, they're building those houses and they're taking breaks and just,
Oh my gosh,
smoking
really?
a little bit of meth while they're on their break. I mean, some
Come
of
on,
us,
Mike, come on.
some of us, are
Some of
addicted
us,
to Diet
you?
Coke, and we drink, 32 ounces of Diet Coke in 10 minutes, and some of us smoke methamphetamine.
Oh my God.
I'm not saying either one's right or wrong. I'm just saying they're different. Okay.
Hey, I was taught it was grandma's house is the one that's most likely to have meth in it,
That
because
might
she
be
lets
true.
those wayward children come in and then they're using.
Yeah.
Wow.
Nightly rentals, any rental.
Mhm.
Yeah. The bottom line is you can't make any assumptions about price range. You can't make assumptions about how new the home is or who's lived there. You can't make those assumptions. Always get a meth test. Yeah. So
One of the funniest ones well, it's not funny, it was serious at the time, but a seller who was a general authority house tested positive, and his kids admitted that one of their friends had let up in the basement and contaminated it. So talk about embarrassing.
meth touches us all.
You never know what you're going to hear on Huddle. That's why we attend.
Yep.
Who knew that seller property disclosure could be so fun?
It's always zesty and exciting. Really out of left field, it really is. Which this is also a really fun one, homeowners associations. This is and can be a huge problem. Things like, can I rent here? Can I rent this property? We all know that needs to be resolved ahead of time. If it's not resolved, we don't close until it's resolved, right? Something as simple as that. You just need to, if you're the listing agent and you don't have your HOA minutes and all the HOA disclosures before you list a home, I will say that you are asking for trouble. You should always get that done beforehand. If you're the buyer's agent and you see a lot of stuff going on there, and you represent the buyer, make sure you tell them, hey, have you talked to the HOA president? Have you talked to the person on 22E that listed their name? Have you had this discussion? You know, press on this. This is a huge issue, homeowners associations. Scott says biggest meth users, white mothers, and number 2, contractors. So you know what? I think Linda and I sort of nailed it there. We
Well,
sort of nailed it there.
I think we've all seen Mother's Job. That's definitely harder.
You know, I think Saved by the Bell actually did an episode all about this, though maybe they weren't using meth, but it was very similar. You know, trying to keep up with the Joneses and get all her work done, and she was just taking too much of whatever.
Man, I agree.
They fixed it in the end, though.
Yeah, Red Bull's a better choice. I mean, be careful though with your Red Bull intake.
I've got a fun one before you move on, the HOA.
Get it.
We have a seller, very high-end home in Park City here, in a small HOA of about 20 homes. They have their own private water supply, and the seller the seller made no disclosures at all on the seller's property condition disclosure that the water supply was not sufficient to cover all the homes, even though it's in the meetings minutes and notes and everything. Well, the buyer just discovered that, and there was a swimming pool at this house, and they went to fill it, and they were informed that there's not enough water there, so they're now trucking water in to fill the swimming pool, and going after the seller for the lack of disclosure, because there's probably going to be an assessment to increase the water supply. All missing from the property disclosure. Might have been a material fact.
Might have been. Just might. Public Infrastructure District, PID, there's not too many of those around, but there are those issues, special assessments for special public infrastructure stuff. I mean, they know if they're in one. You know, you're notified if you're in one. Unpaid assessments. You know, this is a big one, especially for HOAs. You know, it cannot be on their books that they're, you know, due, but everybody knows that something's coming due. That's why we make sure we're having long discussions with HOAs and special assessments and PIDs, stuff like that. This is becoming a bigger one. Insurance. Have you filed any claims on this house? Is this house insurable? You know, a lot of people, I mean, not so far, knock on wood, not in Utah that I'm aware of, but I do know that in California and Florida, it is not the default. It is not just automatically, yes, we can get insurance on this house. That is not the current case. And I do know agents in our company who have bought vacation and Airbnb type properties in Florida and spent a month trying to find insurance for these things. So not
Mike, again on those, every insurance company subscribes to what's called a clue report. And it is actually a record, a database of all claims made by buyers and sellers for every single property. So even though the buyer may qualify for insurance, the property may not. If it has a long string of insurance claims that are in that clue database, they may get denied by insurance company they've used their whole life because the property is shown to have a lot of claims on it and problems, and they decline coverage on it. But that has to be found out during due diligence, and a lot of people wait to place that binder on it till right before closing, and now they pass their due diligence and they're in trouble.
Yeah. Thank you, Kevin. Is the clue report isn't public information? Like, you're not going to get access to it.
Only insurance brokers can access it. It's casualty and liability insurance clue. They have a database for insurance providers, and they can deny coverage based on the history of the home and or the credit of the buyer.
All right, talk to your legislator and get new laws passed.
They also know if your buyers file a lot of claims on their previous home too. It demonstrates to them that the buyer probably doesn't maintain the properties well, and they may choose not to insure them again.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you, Kevin. Solar panels, you know, this one can be a big one. We do have an addendum for solar panels. If this is filled out, feels like the addendum for the solar panel thing needs to be filled out as well. So yeah, there you go. I'm glad we have that disclosure now. It makes things easier. Alternate additional power systems. That is often connected with solar panels. Some people do, most solar panels do not store power. They just put it right back onto the grid, but some people do retrofit it so they can store their own power. Or I do know that backup generators are becoming quite popular to put on the side of your house. So that would be part of that. And I feel like that sort of completes today's section, and only an hour and 50 minutes later. We totally knocked that right out.
Hey, I've got a little kitchen cleaning to do before. Hey, Joe, I sent you a document. Can you share that in the chat? Email it to you. For those who are
Okay, you want me to show it as well, or do you want me to just put it?
yeah,
in
you can
chat?
show it too. Let me go over it really quick, and then we can post it for those who'd like it. This is we had in-person sales meeting in Park City, so we'll get kind of repetitive on this as we go through other sales meetings. But this are add-ons that you can add to the new buyer guide by page. So there's a page reference and things you can add. If you're really wanting to double down and making your value proposition to a buyer, potential buyer client, this is a great way to do that. And so go ahead and share that. Yep, you got it. Go ahead and copy that, bring it down. We're likely going to have that look pretty through the marketing department and share that later. But as you know, Huddle is always the first to get things. So that's why we all come to Huddle, right? So incidentally, we've done a poll, kind of an informal poll in the company. We're running about 30% of our active buyers that are being shown properties have buyer broker agreements. Okay, so let me say that again. 30% of our active buyers that we're currently showing houses to have buyer broker agreements. Now, technically that's legal. Okay, because right now you don't have to have a buyer broker agreement until you enter a REPC, right? So that's okay now, but we have 10 weeks to go. And that will change. And we will have to have written agreements before showings, as we know. And we've been talking about this at nauseum. But so you got 10 weeks to practice. So this is a good time
Well, I have a question.
Yeah. Yeah. Hi, Julie. Go ahead.
So how are you coming up with that number? I mean, like I'm working with, I don't know, maybe 8 buyers right now that I do not have buyer broker, or probably maybe half of them I do, but the ones that I don't, I've never submitted an offer. So I just feel like it could be a lot higher.
Oh yeah, very well could be. This was just raise your hand kind of a thing.
Okay.
Yeah, very informal stuff.
Yeah, very informal. We did this last week in Huddle. We had 16 respond. Gosh, how many do we have? 4, 5, 6? That said they had buyer broker agreements. I don't have it.
There was 6, Will.
It was 6. There you go. Right. And yesterday it was 44 and 16. So that gives us 60 over 20. It would give us about 32%. So it could be a lot higher. So the point is just you don't have much time to change your processes to have your buyer consultation prior to showings. So we'll see how this goes. A little bit of a moving target still. Understand that. Stay tuned. I hope that buyer guide add-on list will help you so you can kind of start to see what you're going to plug in and what you could pull. That would be, if you did everything, that'd be a 3-hour discussion. So that is not the point to have a 3-hour discussion. The point is to make sure that you can pivot where you need to pivot, and you can customize where you need to customize so that you're presenting to someone that, they've all got their unique scenarios so that you can pivot and present to them. So yeah, I hope you copy that before we close the Zoom and that you use that as a resource. Mike, back to you.
Well, it is 1:52, and I don't believe we have really the time to get into any additional information. Does anybody have any issues they want to talk about, problems they'd like to present for us to solve?
Oh, the wall of shame, Scott. His favorite thing.
I was doing some other stuff and then I got interrupted, and I have like one and it's lame, so I'm not really prepared to do a massive wall of shame.
My favorite one out of all time was a stipulation that went something like this. The broker agreed to a stipulation and a fine of like $15,000 and 8 hours of CE. And then it described what they did is they entered the home and they pulled up the carpet, show the hardwood floors. And then it says they also helped themselves to wine that was in the refrigerator. And the reason why I found it so funny is I'm like, you got it backwards. They started out with the wine in the refrigerator and then they ripped up the carpet. So I'm like, who's writing this stuff? Come on. Anyway.
You know what you could do to just write a sitcom is just get all the disciplinary actions all over the country and just make it about real estate agents, and every episode is just like 30 minutes of that dude in the house pulling up carpet and drinking wine.
Well, didn't South Park make a big play on real estate a while back, where they're all getting their? Remember the only way to improve your business was get a new photo, and then you have to do your pose.
You have to bend over backwards.
You have to bend over, and the person who could bend back the most had the best pose. Oh, you got to laugh, otherwise you go crazy. I hope you find the humor in all of this. It's how you stay sane, according to Matt Townsend, who is an expert in psychology and a therapist. Just keep the laughs coming. Well, anyway, hey, we sure love you guys. I appreciate all you do. Proud of all of you. We had a meeting today in which 3 of our agents, we were meeting with a potential recruit. I'm not going to say who. And they mentioned 3 of our agents that they had great respect for, and just a lot of gratitude for the high level of professionalism we have at Brookshire and the great people that you guys are and the professionals you are, because people notice you and they respect you. And we're just lucky to have each other and get to work with each other. Hope you enjoy, the summer weather. Hey, if anybody, hey, Joe, stop recording for a sec. No need to